Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, taking out a fun and exciting episode, guys, this evening, is now that the new version of MAME is out, we're going to be taking a look at the Namco System 22 arcade board. Because recently, every time a new MAME comes out, I go through another platform, seeing just how good the emulation is. And because the System 22 has recently seen updates on the networking side of things, I figured it was a good time to see just how well the preservation was doing on the Namco System 22. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well, because I do plan on keeping these MAME videos around for a very long time. But right off the top, we're taking a look at Ace Driver Victory Lap right here. And just so you know, the original Ace Driver, which is just basically a little bit less of a game than this one, works perfectly as well. You can now network it and have two-player support, so you and your friend can play on the same system if you get the controllers bound correctly. And I would say from the performance to the controls to the music to the visuals and everything else about Ace Driver Victory Lap, I really can't see anything that isn't working like an arcade cabinet would. And the interesting thing is the Ridge Racer cabinets are still going to be relatively common, but I have not seen an Ace Driver cabinet for some years now. If you know where there is one, leave me a comment down below, because I would be curious. For some strange reason, this didn't hit anywhere near as big as something like Ridge Racer did. Maybe just not the type of racing people enjoyed, but I think it's every bit as good as something like a Ridge Racer game. It still gives you that awesome Namco racing action, and the best part is, again, in the most recent version of MAME and the subsequent versions before that, it does seem to be emulating extremely well, and now having networking in, that was a big deal in arcade cabinets back in the day. You and your friend could sit side by side, throw some quarters in, and race each other on these same cores, and that's something that has been lacking on the Namco System 22 side of things for a while now. So having that as an actual capability is awesome, because it means you can do that same head-to-head racing that you did in arcades just from the comfort of your own home. And that is the great thing about the MAME project in general, is the fact that you can't really find these arcade cabinets unless you go to a retro dedicated arcade that might have something like it on the floor, and even that's not a guarantee. So MAME is definitely keeping games like Ace Driver Victory Lap alive. And that's all we really ever want, is the ability to continue to make sure everyone can play these games into the future. Now, on the specs for performance, just so you know, I'm using an i9-12900K at 5.4 GHz overclocked on the best core. Technically, it's overclocked to 5.5 GHz, but it likes to settle in at 5.4. So if you have a potato CPU, your results may vary, and if you have a potato CPU, go ahead and test what sort of frame rate you get out of this game, and leave me a comment down below. I've been collecting some good data as far as what CPUs are running full speed and which ones aren't. That actually helps me recommend to people whether or not I think they should play a game on MAME in the future. When somebody says, is it going to run on an i5-2300, some old generation Intel, if people report data to me, it actually helps me tell them, now it might be time to upgrade that system, even if it is just for emulation, or I can give them the green flag, pun very much intended, for Ace Driver, and say you should be fine. But I just love how this game looks. It's got those classic Namco colors, kind of those pastels. Starts looking a little bit like Ridge Racer in spots for sure, and it just is another incredible arcade racing game that I absolutely love to play, and it is one that seems to be absolutely perfect in MAME and preserved for a long time to come for anyone who wants to play it. Now let's move over to another racing game on the Namco System 22. This is Rave Racer, and I talked about it last summer in a retrospective. It was the last game that was a traditional arcade game in the franchise before Ridge Racer basically became an exclusive console and handheld sort of platform. It's one of those things, you always think of Ridge Racer as being an arcade franchise, but there are really only 3 games ever released arcades, and one of them, Pocket Racer, was basically a PlayStation 1 version game in the arcade. So it's really one of those strange things. Ridge Racer is more of a console series than it is an arcade series, but if you got your start in the arcade, you'll always think it is an arcade game. And just like Ace Driver Victory Lap and Ace Driver, Rave Racer seems to be working absolutely as well as the other games. You get networking in here, you get great graphics. I know some people don't love how the camera sways in the opposite direction of the turn. It's one of those stylistic choices Namco made back in the day that people either love or hate, but as far as actually playing this game, it just seems to look and play exactly how I remember, and Rave Racer was nowhere near as common of a cabinet back in the day, and now today, I haven't seen one for like 10 or 15 years. But it's soundtrack sample time, so you can hear the quality of the sound emulation on the Namco System 22 platform on MAME, so go ahead and listen. I'll be right back to show you some more games.
Don't give up! Keep on it!
2 laps to go!
I mean, that sounds great to me, from the music to the sound effects to the announcer's voice just kind of encouraging you on. There's nothing in the audio that makes me think it's doing anything wrong. But if you have any other opinions, leave me a comment down below, because again, I always say, you guys have thousands upon thousands of sets of eyes and ears. I only have the 2 eyes and 2 ears, so sometimes I miss things that viewers do find and leave me a comment below for. It definitely does help me out just to basically better understand, because again, I look at a lot of footage and you guys just watch one video. But as far as Rave Racer is concerned, it's an absolutely awesome game and definitely my preferred game compared to the original Ridge Racer. And it's one of those things, depending on which one you like better, maybe you'll disagree with me, but the best part is both the Ridge Racer games as well as Rave Racer are going to be preserved into the future on their arcade variant. And something like Rave Racer never getting a home console port, that means that MAME really is keeping this alive for absolutely everyone, unless you buy really expensive and very bulky System 22 hardware, because trust me, they're absolutely massive. They weigh a ton, they require custom cabling unless you get the cables along with the board, and it can be an absolute chore to run them in the home. And that's why, even though I do love collecting a lot of 3D arcade hardware, especially the custom stuff, something like Rave Racer wouldn't be a board I'd pick up, because MAME performs so well when you're actually playing the game. There'd be no real upside to having such a massive board in my collection, and that is why MAME is so great. I'm sure at some point in time, so many of my games in my collection that I'll emulate now are going to, and I'm absolutely excited for that. I don't need to own the arcade boards, I just need to be able to experience the games, and I want you to be able to play them too. So every single time we get a new game added to MAME, it is awesome, because it means that game is going to live on in perpetuity for time to come. Now moving over to the next game, Cyber Commando. This is another one that's absolutely just working, although it does take some time to configure the controls, and they kind of fought me here a little bit. This is a twin stick shooter, so it's definitely a game that's going to perform better if you actually have a twin stick setup. I was trying to bind this over to my analog controller in Xbox Series X, and I got most of it right, but I think maybe I had dropped one input somewhere down the line. Do remember that some arcade games require very specialized controls, so you might think something's not working, quote unquote, but you'll realize that you just didn't actually bind it the way you think you should have. So do pay attention to when you're binding the controls. Some things will be fine by default, others you kind of have to go in there and basically just kind of play around until you get the right configuration for your feel as well as for the game, because obviously a twin stick shooter can be basically pivoted over to a twin analog stick controller like anything modern, but you do need to do a little bit more thinking. But as far as the graphics here, as far as the music, everything looks great, and you will see that all of the polygons are perspective correct. There's no warping whatsoever, and that's because the Namco System 22 didn't have any of those issues compared to something like PlayStation 1. It was very powerful hardware for the arcades, and it looks incredible here. And this is another game. It is a ton of fun, and probably one you haven't seen for a while, but leave me a comment down below and you tell me, have you ever played Cyber Commando, and if so, what did you think? And if you've seen a cabinet recently, I would also be curious. Half the reason I do these videos is I get reports from you as to where these cabinets still live, and if I'm in that area, I'll swing by. I don't usually tell anybody that I'm doing it and play them just for fun. But here's a second soundtrack sample. Listen and I'll be right back. Sounds great to me, and if you did notice that a note basically repeated every once in a while, I listened to an original soundtrack capture as well, and it had the exact same repeating note, so it seems like that was just the music stylings that the actual musicians went with when they made the soundtrack to the game. Now moving over to Ridge Racer 2, just so you know, Namco can call it Ridge Racer 2 all day long, and they can try to sell that concept to you, but this is basically just a ROM upgrade to Ridge Racer, and again, it's another game that's going to be working near to perfectly. If I didn't feature a game in this video, that doesn't mean it's not working, it just means I kind of hand selected what I wanted to talk about. Every Namco System 22 game is working, and you can play it outside of stuff like the gigantic sim drive versions of Ridge Racer. That's just because they don't seem to be dumped yet. But as far as the arcade cabinets you would have seen in arcades back in the day, you can sit down at your computer, load up MAME, make sure you have the right file set, bind your controls, and just start enjoying some gameplay. And now that there is networking support in for these boards, you can enjoy that exact same gameplay with a friend sitting next to you. It does require a little bit more setup, and because the audio isn't synced across both cabinets just like it would be in the arcades, sometimes if you're listening to the audio together it can be slightly off cadence, but that's because it's supposed to be that way. But otherwise, it is an awesome feature to have these things networked, because basically what it's doing is not emulating just one system but two systems at the same time, or two instances of the same arcade board. Because when you'd see those 2 or 4 player arcade setups back in the day, it wasn't just one arcade board with 4 sets of controls plugged in, it was 4 different arcade boards that would then be networked together to communicate. So that is a very impressive feat that MAME's pulled that off, and networking does work. And if we take a look here at the original Ridge Racer as well, that's another game that's going to be working in MAME. So it's so great to have all of these Namco System 22 games working and preserved for all time. But leave me a comment down below and tell me, of the games you've seen in this video, which one's your favorite and which one's the one you've never played before. I'd be curious to hear who hasn't played a particular game. I feel like maybe Ace Driver Victory Lap is going to be the winner for games that people say, I didn't realize that existed, because for as much hype as Ridge Racer gets, deservedly so, for some strange reason Ace Driver and Ace Driver Victory Lap just don't get that same acclaim, and that's always surprising to me. But I remember some years ago when these games would barely function whatsoever, or they'd run at like 15-20 frames per second and have graphical corruption. Obviously now that isn't the case whatsoever, at least on my system. It's running full speed and really does feel about as close as you can get to playing the arcade original, outside of having a giant cabinet with a wheel as well as pedals and a shifter in front of you. And that is always awesome, because sure, you can probably go find a Ridge Racer cabinet in an arcade somewhere, for the rest of these games it's going to be very hard to find them, and that is why MAME is so important. It's going to keep these games alive for the future. But I enjoy making these videos, kind of doing deep dives into a particular arcade board. So leave me a comment down below and you tell me, what's the next board you'd like to see me do a video on? There's so many out there. I got so many plans. If there's something in particular you want to see, just tell me down below and I'll definitely check it out. But otherwise, give Namco System 22 games a shot, and I'm sure soon I'll probably do a Super System 22 video, because they are different boards that use slightly different emulation and have slightly different results. But we're done. I'm going to drift into the finish, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.